thank you folks for joining us. I'm going to share my screen, then go through a few slides. Awesome. Uh, I'm Vihar, one of the developer advocates at AppSmith here. Today we also have Conference, who's one of our developer advocates. So Conference will be building the Postgres admin in few minutes. So before getting started, let me just talk to you about the inspiration behind we building this Postgres admin. Cool. So Postgres admin is basically a GUI-based tool that lets developers connect to any Postgres data and configure their entire database. So say, for example, you have a database on a server, and then you want to configure it. You can simply use the Postgres admin tool to configure all your database settings, as in configure all your database, as in you can create new tables, you can customize all your columns, you can add in new data, and also you can write all your Postgres queries to get things done. So this is basically what Postgres admin does, but there are a few drawbacks with this Postgres admin. So one good thing is that it's open source, but then still the UI looks old, and for a lot of developers it's difficult for uh, you know getting things done faster, as in say if you want to create new tables or customize your columns in your database, then the UI is not that great on Postgres admin. This is what I personally feel, and I have been reading lots of posts on Reddit and also other social medias regarding the same issue. So we thought of building our own Postgres admin on AppSmith, where you can connect any Postgres database and configure your entire database, basically manage your entire database. So that was the inspiration for us to build this Postgres admin. So one thing we highly rely on Postgres at AppSmith for different services. If you can log into our application, you see a few mock databases which are run on Postgres. We completely manage them using this admin. And also there are no other open source alternatives to PgAdmin, so you can use this application, fork it, and use this to configure your entire databases. And one super cool thing with this PgAdmin that we are going to build is that it's completely customizable and extensible. Say if you want to have email integrations, or say if you want to extend it for any other use case, extending APIs from the database directly, you can extend it via AppSmith. So these are some of the features that Confidence will be building this in this live demo. So first we'll be connecting to a Postgres DB, and this application lets you to create and view all the tables that are there in this admin panel. You can also delete these tables, and you can look at all the table columns. Not just that, you can also create new columns within a table. You can also configure all your data types and stuff like that. At the end of the session, we'll also share some ideas on customizing this for different use cases. But however, in case if you have any questions, or if you have any queries, you can just ping them on chat. We'll answer at the end of the session. The recording of the session will be also be posted on YouTube, so you can always go through this application. So with that being said, I'm gonna head over to Conference. So Conference, you can start building the application.
All right, thank you, Viha. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, Conference, I can see your screen.
All right. So this is the application we are going to be building today. As you already heard from Viha, it's a Postgres admin GUI tool that will be used to manage the database. So it has a couple of features. We would be able to see schemas from your database. We have a public schema, and some of these default schemas created by Postgres. And selecting the schema, we can see all database inside of that schema. So we can click on the view button to see the columns inside of the tables listed, and we can see all of that data. We can edit this data, and we have a form here to edit this. We can also delete the data, as well as delete the table, create a new table, as we can see here, and also create new entries in the table. So this is largely what we're going to be building, and I think we can get started. So I'm just going to head back to the editor. All right, so right here, I am in the editor, and as you can see, we have a few widgets already on the canvas. Here we have a tab widget, we have a divider widget, and we have a container widget. And with this, we would start off building the application. We also have a couple of pre-written SQL queries. We'll go through each one of these as we go on to build the application. And as you can see, we already have the application connected to a Postgres instance. This is running on Supabase right now, but it would still work the same way for any Postgres instance that you have running. So the first thing we need to do here is to create a query that would help us fetch schemas. And with that, we would go on to build the form that lets us choose schemas so that we can see tables listed under those schemas. So I'm going to create a new query. Let's call this get schemas. And we can use any of these templates. So I have a simple SQL query to get schema information from the database. And running this, we can see all the schemas coming in from the database. Now we can head back to the canvas to start building the form. So the first widget I would like to drop would be a select widget. So I'm just going to place this right here and resize this a bit. And the options in this select widget will be built using data coming from the get schema query. So for the widget itself, let's update the name to say schema select. And for the options, we can bring this data from get schemas.data. But taking a look at the expected structure for this widget, we can see that this widget expects an array of objects that have a label and value. And right now we are not returning the correct strip. That's why we're having this kind of red error telling us that there's something wrong. So we can easily map over this and return the correct strip for the data. So I'm just going to map over this and return an object that has the correct strip, an array of objects that would have the correct strip. So this is going to be value, should be s dot schema name, and also needs to send up a label, which is going to be s dot schema name. And now we are returning the correct strip. So for the default option, we can just set this to public, because we are sure that public would always exist in the database. So we can just set that to the default. And here we have the drop down for the schema. So the next thing we want to do is that we want it such that when the schema changes, we actually go to call a query that would get all tables from the database. So for that, we would need to write a query to grab all tables from the database. So let's go to create a query. I'm going to select Supabase, new query. So we're going to call this query get tables. And we can use any of these templates. So I have a simple query here that would get all tables using the schema that was selected from the select dropdown we just configured. So running this should get us all tables in the public namespace, and we can see all the tables in that namespace. Now we can head back to start building the view for the tables. So for this, we need to bring a list widget. So I'm just going to bring a list widget right here. Let's resize this a bit, and we can move this to the left-hand side, expand this, and bring this down. Yeah, and this looks good. So I'm going to delete that image. So the first thing we want to do is to update the name of this widget. So let's call this table list. And for the data displayed in the table list, we want to be reading this from the get tables query. So this is going to be get tables.data. One other thing we need to do is to head back to the select widget, and we want to make sure that whenever this changes, we want to execute a query and we want to call the get tables query. Yeah, so that will always make sure that we are getting the correct tables for the schema selected. All right, so the next thing we need to do is to display information about the tables coming in. So for that, I would need to bring in a few text widgets. So I'm just going to bring in a text widget here and bring in another one here. For the first text widget, we want to display the name. So I'm just going to update this to say name. And we can go ahead to display this using the other widget we have here. So this is going to be current item dot. So this is going to be current item dot table name, and we have the table name showing. We also want to show information about the table owner. So let's edit this to say owner, and similarly for the text widget here, we can expand this and make it display the table owner. So let's do that. So this is going to be current item dot table owner, and then we have the table owner showing up. So changing this would actually display all tables for that selected schema. So let's go back to public, and here we have all the tables showing up. So we need a couple of buttons here. We need a button to enable us view information about that table. We also need another button to let us delete that table if we want to. So I'm just going to place 2 buttons here. One is going to be for the view, and the second one will be for the delete. So let's edit this to say view. And we have a lot of options here to configure the look and feel of these buttons. So I'm just going to leave the button style to primary and set it to an outline button. And for the delete button, so let's call this delete. For the button style, I'm going to set this to danger and also make this outline. And here we have the delete and edit buttons. So what we want to do is that we want to wire up the delete flow such that when it is clicked on, it actually goes ahead to delete the table that was selected. So to do that, we can go to the on-click action of this button. And when this is clicked on, we want to execute a query, and we have a delete table query or a drop table query. And this will actually go ahead to delete the table selected. So when this is successful, what we want to do is to rerun the get tables query so that we have fresh list of data showing up in this table. So we are just going to quickly test this out. So I'm going to delete this table. So let's see. Okay, and we can see that works. That table has been removed. Next thing we want to do is that we want to be able to create tables. So to do that, I'm just going to bring in a button widget, because we would need to open up a modal that would be used for the table creation process. So we need a couple of modals. So I'm just going to drop one modal here, and let's update the name of this modal to new table modal. And one cool feature that was released yesterday is the ability to resize modals to fit whatever form you would prefer. So I can expand this to be very long. I can also make this very wide. And I'm just going to put this back. So now you have the ability to really resize the modal and make it the way you want to. So now we have this modal. I'm just going to update the name one more time. So this is new table modal. And we want to configure this button. Let's call this add. When this button is clicked on, what we want to do is to open up that modal. So let us do open modal, and we want to open up the modal we just created. So clicking on this should open up that modal, and this looks good. All right, so we would need to clear out everything within this modal. So I'm just going to select everything here. That didn't work. Let's do this one more time. And delete all the widgets. And that is because I'm going to be bringing a form widget into this modal, and we are going to be configuring the flow of creating tables using this form widget. So let's make this fixed so that it does not scroll. All right, so I can bring the buttons to the bottom and place this to the side. All right. All right, so the first thing we need to place here is an input that would let us type in or enter in the name of the table we want to be created. So for that, I'm just going to bring in an input widget. Let's place this here, and I'm going to expand this. So let's call this input new table name, and we can say here new table. And for the label, we can just update this to say name because this input will be used to enter in the name of the table we're creating. So let's just call this name. And then we have something looking nice. We would also need a table widget. So I'm just going to bring a table widget and place this here. And I'm going to expand this. We're going to be using this table widget to visualize all columns that will be created inside of this table. So as we move on, you see why we're doing this. And we would need two other buttons. We would need a reset button to clear out all the columns we are trying to create. And we would need another button to add new column entries into this table. So let's call this add. All right. And when it is clicked on, it is going to open up a different modal that would let us add new columns. So let's build the flow for that. So I'm just going to drop in a new modal. So I'm going to call this modal new table column modal. All right. So similarly, I'll clear out everything we have here. Just going to delete this. Also delete this too. All right. And we're going to bring in a form widget. So I think I can just make this scrollable actually, so that, okay. Expand this a bit. And we can bring in a form widget. This is right here. And I would not need this to be very big, so I'm just going to reduce the size of everything. All right, this looks good. So we would not be needing this text widget, so I'm going to delete that. So what we need to do here is to bring in an input widget that would let us type in the name of the column. So I'm just going to expand this. So for this input, we're going to call it new table call name. That will be the name of the column. And this is going to be column name. Next thing we need to do is to bring in a select widget that would let us set a data type for the column we're trying to create. So I'm just going to drop that and bring in a text widget also. Since I don't have enough room to do that. So let's reduce this a bit. And I can bring this here. All right, so let's call this data type. And for the drop down, we would need to supply an array of data types we want to allow to use for the creation of the columns. So I'm just going to do that right now. So for the select, we would be supplying that array, and we can set the default value to be text. So let's just set this to text. And we have text string up here. And let's call this new table call type, so that we can set the type for the data. We also need two other widgets. We would need a switch widget to help us set this column to be the primary key or not. So let's call this nt call p key. And for the label, we are going to say primary key. All right, so I'm just going to expand this. And we would need one more to be able to specify if this field is nullable. So let's call this not null. And this is going to be nt call not null. And we can set this to be turned off by default, both of these to be turned off by default. All right, so I'm going to turn this off. And similarly, I'll do the same for this. I'm going to turn it off. All right, so what we want to do here is that we want it such that when the submit button is clicked, we actually add the column that is being edited here into an array of columns and then display it in previous model. So to do that, I would need to go into this button and enable JavaScript because we will be doing a lot here. So the first thing I want to do is to write an IFI because we actually have a lot to do. So I'm just going to write an IFI and invoke this real quick. Seems I have a typo here. Okay, now that looks good. So let's grab the array of columns we are trying to create from the store because everything will be stored in the local store. So let's call this const ntcol, and we can grab this from appsmith.store.ntcol. If this will be the first time we're doing this will be undefined because there will be no default array stored here. So what we can do is to supply a default of an empty array, and we can go on to build this from here. All right, so the next thing we need to do is to actually push the data that's been entered within this form into that array, and then we can move on to save this back into the store. So this will be ntcol.push. And what we want to do is to push up an object that is going to have a name, and that name will be coming from the name input. So this will be ntcol name.text. All right, we also want to push up the data type. So let's do something like dtype. This is going to be coming from ntcol type dot selected option value. We also want to send up the Boolean that will help us determine if this is the primary key. So let's do p key. All right, I think my keyboard is having some issues. So this is p key. And this is going to be ntcol pkey.is switched on. Okay, is switched on. And lastly, we want to send up the not null Boolean. So let's do n null. And this will be ntcol n null.is switched on. Yeah, and I think this looks good. So we can go on to store this in the absent store. So this will be store value. For the key, this will be ntcol. And for the array, we are just going to pass in the variable ntcol variable. And lastly, we can open up the previous modal so that we get to see what we have just created. So we want to show modal. And for that modal, this is going to be the nt modal. All right, I think this looks good. So we can actually test this out. I'm just going to enter a column name. So let's say ID, and this is going to be the primary key. So clicking on submit, and we have that stored hopefully. So what we can do here is to display data we have stored in the AppSmith store within this table. So this is going to be appsmith.store.ntcol. And taking a look at this, we can see the column I just created, which is the ID column, the type of that column. We have set that to the primary key, and we have set the not null to be false. All right, so this actually works. We can go into configure this button to reset every column we are trying to create, and just in case we make a mistake and we want to clear everything out. So this is going to be reset. So reset, and we can set this to a warning button, and let's make this outline. All right, when this is clicked on, what we want to do is just to reset data in the store. So when this is clicked on, we want to let's just go to JavaScript mode. We want to store value, and we want to override what is in the ntcol space. So I'm just going to store an empty array, and that would reset everything within that space. All right, so I'm going to also style this button. So let's make this outline, and this looks good. All right, this looks good. So now we can go on to write a query that would actually talk to the database to create this table for us. So to do that, I would need to write a create table query. So let's just do that. So I'm going to head over to the database, create a new query, and let's call this create table. And I have some query written here that would help us do just that. So taking a look at what we have here, we are actually using JavaScript to generate the SQL statement that would be sent to the database. So we're using the data stored in the store, and from that data, we are generating a string that will specify information about the column we are creating. And we have the schema that was selected, which is public in this case, and then the database name coming from the name input we created on the first model. So I'm just going to turn off prepared statement here just to make sure everything works fine. Now we can go back to hook this up and see if everything works fine. So I'm just going to go to the on-click actions here. And what I want to do is to call the create table query. So this will be create table.run. And when this is successful, we want to refresh the tables list so that we see the updated information. And then we want to close up this model. So we want to call get tables.run. And when that is done, we also want to close up this model. Close model, and the name of this model is the NT new table model. All right, so we can test this out. I'm just going to give this a name. So let's call this my table. All right, so let's click on the submit button and we'll see if everything works fine. And taking a look at this, you see that we have my table created. Was this? No, this is not the table we just created. Okay, I think this was the table we just created. So I'm just going to delete this to make sure that we are actually having everything working. So let's call this my new table. All right, so let's make sure. All right, so we can see that the table is actually getting created. So the next thing we want to do is to configure a flow that would let us view columns in the selected table, because right now we can view tables, we can create tables, we can delete tables, but we can't actually see columns in the tables we have. So we need to be able to do that. So we have a view button here, but what I can do is to go to the list widget we have here and make it such that when an item is clicked on, we actually go to get information that would let us view the columns in that particular table. So when this is clicked on, I'm just going to enable JavaScript. When this is clicked on, I want to run the get columns query. And this is a simple query. It's one of the pre-written queries here that would help us get the columns for the particular table that was selected. So we want to call the get columns query. And when that is successful, we can go on to call two queries. The first is a query that will help us get the primary key of the selected table. So that is get p key. Then we also want to call a query that would help us get the schema for that selected table. So this is get table column schema dot run, and that will get us the schema for the table. So selecting something now is going to grab information about that table, but right now we are not displaying that, so that's why you can't see anything. Now let's actually build a flow that would let us see that information. So to do that, I'm going to bring in a table widget. So let's bring in a table widget, place this there. And I'm going to expand this. All right. And what we can do here is display the information coming in. So this is going to be get columns.data. And we can see that we actually have information coming in. So changing this to a different table, like we have the response table, you can see that we have new information showing up on the table. All right. One more thing we want to do here is to create a flow that would let us create new columns in the table. So to do that, we would similarly need a modal to create this. And I'm going to call this new column modal. And we can make this fixed and expand this a bit. All right. So similarly, I would need to clear out everything we have here.
You can just use Command A.
Okay. That already worked. All right. So this is clean. Now I can bring in a form that would let me do the creation process. So I'm going to bring in the form widget, place this right here. And move the reset button to this end, and also the submit button to the other end. And we'll need a list widget inside of this. So let's bring in a list widget. All right, this is the list widget. All right, we have the list widget here. All right, so now I can clear this out because I would not be needing this. The next thing we want to do is to actually give this a name. So let's say new column. And the reason why we're using this list widget is so that we are able to auto-generate a form that would let us create new items for the table that is selected. So for the data coming into this list, so we want to update this to be built from the data we are getting from the schema for this table. So we have a query called get table schema that we ran earlier. And taking a look at this data, we can actually see the schema for this table. And with that information, we can go ahead to build a form that would let us create new entries for this selected table. So this will be get schema.data. And you can see that we have the ID field, the employee field, and some other fields that are for this selected table. So what we can do is just return the column name, because that's what we are actually interested in. We are not interested in data type. So we can map over this and return the column name. All right, and here we have an array that contains only the column names. So let's call this new column list. And we have a text widget here, so we're going to use this as a label. I'm just going to move this to the other side. So we are going to display current item, which will be the column name we are editing. So we have ID, employee, and question, and we can bring in an input widget and just place this right here. Okay, we already have a label in here, so I'm just going to disable this label and expand this to take up the entire space. And we can make this a little bit faint. All right, so this looks good. And since we would only need these two elements within each form entry, I can resize this so that it looks nice and takes less space. And we have an auto-generated form to create columns. So what we want to do now is to hook this up so that we can actually go in to create columns, like send a query to the database that will enable us to create columns. So for that, I have a query to do that. So when this is clicked on, we want to go to call a query that would let us create new columns. So this is a new query. Click on create. And this is very, very similar to what we did for the create table query. So we are, again, using JavaScript to create the string that will be sent up to the database to create the column that we are interested in. So I'm just going to turn off the break statement. And I think you can see this. We have undefined fields because we don't have any data entered in yet, but we can go back to actually check this out. But taking a look at the column entries here, which is the array we have here, we can see that we have the text being prefilled. So let's go back and hook this up. Let's actually bring in a button here to enable us open up that model. So we are going to say new column. And when this is clicked on, we want to open up that model. So we have the new column model. All right. So clicking on this is going to open up this model. And when this is submitted, we want to go to call that query. So let's just do that. So go to the JavaScript mode, call the creates column.run. And when this is successful, we want to rerun the get columns query so that we actually have fresh data coming back So we want to run the get columns dot run, and we can close up this model. So let's do close model. And for the name of this model, this is the new column model. Okay, so let's give this a test. I would quickly type in some ID. So let's say A, for example, employee B, question C, comment C, completed that is going to be a date. I don't know what a date string is. So let's check this out by opening up a new, okay, this looks simple. This also has a date. So let's look for something that does not have a date. Do you know what? We can actually use the new table we just created. So I'm just going to click on view here and let's click on new column. We only have an ID field. So I'm just going to type in an ID. And let's click on submit to see if everything works fine. And we can see that we have that column created. So this table is a really simple table. It only has an ID column and we can see the value of that ID. And that works nice. So let's go back to a more complicated table. Because what we want to do now is to add a flow that would let us edit tables and also edit columns and also delete columns. So I'm going to create a new custom column. So let's call this edit. And for the column type, I'm going to set this to an icon button. We have an edit icon. I'm going to set this to primary and make it outlined. And we have a nice edit icon. So when this is clicked on, what we want to do is to open up a model we have pre-configured that has the same flow for editing. And it's very similar to what we did for the create flow. So I'm just going to open up the edit column model and we can take a look at this. I'm just going to click on edit here. And you see that it's very similar to what we have for the create new column flow. So let's head back to the table and add one more column, which will be a custom column to delete the selected item. So I am going to, okay, let's go into edit this. So I'm going to set this to an icon button. And for the icon, we have the trash icon. We can set this to danger and make this outlined. And when this is clicked on, we want to just delete the selected item. So we have a delete column query. We want to run that. And when it is successful, we want to go ahead to refresh this table by calling the get columns query. So this will be get columns dot run. All right, and that looks good. All right, so we can actually check this out by heading to the my new table. So let's check this out. We have my new table. I can edit this. So let's edit this to something else. Let's say ABC. It seems to have a bug. Seems we have a bug here. Now let's see if the delete works. All right, it seems I have a small issue here with this table. I'm just going to try to see if this is also happening here. So this is ABC. So click on update. Okay, so I have a small issue with this and still not working. So I think the issue should be coming from the edit query. So let's see if the edit query works fine. Okay, so I know what the issue is. So I need to update the name of this table to table lists. Table list. So let's update this. So let's just call this table.
I think there's already a table with that name. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. So I'm just going to say table LST, and we can go back to the edit query and update this to LST. And same also for the delete query. So this is going to be table. Okay, so let's see if this works now. So try to edit this and see. Still having some issues.
There is some select widget called table list, and also column underscore table is undefined.
The select widget we have here is the schema select. And I don't know why we have this issue. All right, let's see. I think I'll need to debug this at the background. I don't know why this issue is coming up, but the idea is that clicking on the edit button would run the edit query, and we'll be able to edit this and save this. And the same also goes for the delete query. So I think this is a small issue that I'm just going to fix later on.
Conference, can we show that on the original application that you have built?
Yeah. So I'm just going to try to edit this. Oh, okay. This should be the right name. Oh, so I think I've seen where the issue is coming from. Table list. So this should be called table. And same also goes for the delete. Table list. Okay, so it should be called table. All right, so let's see if this works. Okay, so try to update this. Okay, yeah, so that was the where the bug is coming from, the name of the table. And we can also actually go ahead to delete this. And we have an empty table here. So now that this is done, we can just give the application a name and go ahead to deploy this. So I'm just going to drag in a widget here and say PgAdmin. Set this to heading 1, and we can center line this. And this looks good, so we can go ahead to deploy this. And we can view a table and see all data within that table. All right, so this is the admin dashboard.
Thanks, Conference. Thanks for the great demo. I've just realized that we were able to build a part of PgAdmin in just 40 minutes, which is like super cool using AppSmith. Cool. Awesome, guys. So the full version of this application will be published soon on our blog. You can fork that application and also connect to your Postgres database and play with it, or extend that based on your use cases. So we are gonna wait for a couple of minutes to take some questions. So if you have any questions, you can put them in chat or unmute yourself and ask them here. Okay, we have a question. Is there a way to theme the dashboard with my brand colors? Yes, Arpit, you can customize your entire application. Conference, can you just share your screen and walk through the container widgets and the text widgets and coloring them?
Okay, sharing my screen.
So on that note, we are also gonna be writing a few tutorials where you can customize all your tables with different colors and completely change the entire UI. So yeah.
All right, so I already did a little bit of I already showed a little bit of this while we're building out the buttons. So for the buttons, you now have complete control over everything about the button. You can set a custom color. So we have a field for custom color, and you can set this to be whatever your brand color is. So say something like blue. It seems I have an issue here. So let me set this solid. I might just need to reload this, but the idea is you'll be able to set a custom color for the button, and the same also goes for the container widget. So we have a container widget here. I'm just going to move this so that you can see it. So we have a container widget here. Okay, this is it. And you can go into set your brand colors here the same way. So set this to be whatever you want it to be, set a border for it. And if you like shadows, you can also set some shadows to make it look cool. Yeah, so that's the general idea.
Thanks, Conference. So David Bamboo just says that the label for the new input widget is very good. So yeah, the input widget just got upgraded, so you need not add additional text box to add in labels for input widgets, which is like super cool.
Yeah, that's true. And something I really liked that I saw that I talked a bit about in today's video is the ability to control the size of modals. So previously we only had 2 preset size for modals. You can make it small or you can make it just this big, and that's all you have. But right now you can, it's really flexible, and you can make this to be as big as you need it to be, and that really gives you all the flexibility you need. So this is also something cool that's worth mentioning.
All right, folks. Thank you all for joining us. You can also extend this application. So on AppSmith, you can not only build PgAdmin, there are different data sources that works with AppSmith. So you can build a Mongo admin, like different admin panels using the AppSmith. So feel free to try them out. We'll also be publishing a long form tutorial on how we created this PgAdmin. So we will gonna share that on all our social channels. All right then. Thank you folks for joining in.